Some heroes return from war in silence, not to parades or medals or flags held tight against trembling chests, but to forgotten fences and dirt floors that smell of rust and old rain. Some do not come home in uniform, nor carried beneath one. Some return broken, unrecognized, carrying memories too heavy for muscle and bone. This is the story of a war horse with no name, a soldier without a voice, and the miracle that brought him back from the edge of death to the hands that never stopped missing him. It began on a cold February morning in southern Louisiana, in a place where forgotten horses wait for trucks that never drive them home. The kill pen squatted at the edge of an abandoned fairground, its metal panels slick with rust and mud. The air smelled of ammonia, damp hay, and something darker, the scent of endings. Horses shifted restlessly in cramped pens, eyes dull, ribs visible like scars through thin coats. Outside, rain drummed against tin roofing, masking the sound of restless hooves and muffled coughing. Then came a sound that cut through everything, the sharp metallic bang of a gate slamming. It sent one horse into a violent panic. A tall bay gelding with a jagged white blaze across his face launched backward, slamming his hind legs into the steel panels so hard they shuddered. His breath tore from him in ragged bursts, eyes wide, with the white-rimmed terror of something unseen. His right hind leg buckled beneath him, forcing him to the ground. Scars webbed across his shoulder and flank, deep, raised reminders of something that did not come from accidents or pasture wire. Something made by fire, by shrapnel, by explosions built to end life. He lay trembling, hooves scraping at the muddy floor, nostrils flaring violently. Another gate banged, and he screamed, not the call of a frightened horse, but the sound of memory ripping open. He thrashed upward again and again, trying to run though there was nowhere to go. The workers swore under their breath. They had seen fear, all horses in kill pens had it, but they had never seen terror like this. Terror that reacted to specific sounds. Terror that came from a place far from Louisiana, far from rain and rust, and auction tags pinned to halters. A woman watched from outside the pen, hands clenched around a clipboard. Her name was Mara Bennett, director of a struggling rescue that specialized in last-chance horses, the ones who arrived broken in body and mind, the ones no one else wanted. She had seen starvation, abuse, neglect, but something about this gelding froze her breath in her chest. Even half-collapsed in mud, he radiated something heavy, like the air around monuments and grave. He bore the look of an animal who once knew purpose, discipline, command. His muscles, though wasted, held the ghost of strength. The scars were patterned, symmetrical, surgical, and the shoes on his hooves weren't cheap auction tack. They were military-grade impact shoes, reinforced for explosive detection units. He had been trained, he had served, and something had broken him. A kill buyer shouted a price over the pen, a number horrifyingly small, the dollar value placed on a life moments before it disappears. Mara did not blink. She offered every cent the rescue had left, money meant for feed, hay, medicine, money they didn't have, money they couldn't spare. The pen gate opened. The gelding flinched violently, expecting pain. Instead, a blanket landed gently across his trembling back. A halter touched his face with hands that did not command, only asked. His breathing slowed, only slightly. His body collapsed again, exhausted. It took 4 people and a sling to get him onto the trailer. By the time they pulled away, rain streaked the windows like tears. No one knew his name. His paperwork said nothing but Bay gelding, lame, dangerous, unfit. No history. No owner, no past. But his eyes told the truth. He had not always been nobody. He had once belonged to someone. At the rehabilitation center 2 hours away, the gelding refused feed for 2 days. He stood motionless in the corner of his stall, head low, ears flat, breathing shallow. Every sudden noise, a dropped bucket, a slamming door, even a raised voice, sent him crashing into walls as though dodging explosions. The vet examining him paused over a ridge of scar tissue along his shoulder. deep burns, embedded shrapnel still buried along the ribs, surgical incisions consistent with battlefield triage. Then she reached his neck and found it. A small, hard bump beneath the skin, a microchip, but unlike any used in civilian horses. She scanned it. Numbers flickered across the screen, then froze. Her eyes widened. She scanned again, not a ranch horse, not an abandoned riding animal, not discard or accident, a United States Department of Defense identification chip, classification, explosives detection K-Equine unit, special operations task group deployment, status, killed in action, date 7 years earlier. The horse was legally dead, yet here he stood, alive, shaking, breathing, broken. Records showed he had been deployed overseas with a handler named Staff Sergeant Daniel Ford, a decorated veteran who received an honorable discharge after severe injuries during a bombing operation. The horse had disappeared in the explosion that wounded Ford. The official report listed both the horse and 2 other soldiers as unrecoverable in the blast. They had buried a folded flag for him. They had held a memorial. And Ford had carried the guilt of that day ever since, guilt so heavy that it ended the life he once knew. Mara sent a message through military channels, unsure whether anyone would even answer. 3 days passed. The gelding stood in silence. He did not lay down, he did not eat. He simply waited, as if expecting orders that would never come. Then the call came back. Daniel Ford was alive, living alone outside Denver, recovering, barely, haunted. When he was told the horse, his horse, might still be living, there was silence on the line so long the coordinator thought the call had dropped. Then came a single, shaking breath, like air returning to lungs after years underwater. He would come. The journey from Colorado to Louisiana took 15 hours, but for Daniel Ford, it felt like traveling across years. He drove alone, hands locked around the steering wheel, knuckles white, shirt soaked through with nervous sweat. The road blurred past in long, unbroken stretches of asphalt and silence. Every passing mile pulled memories loose like stitches tearing. For 7 years, the world had believed the horse was dead. For 7 years, so had he. Not physically, his body continued, breath continued, heart continued, but the part of him that once moved with purpose had fallen silent the day the blast took everything. He left the military with medals no longer polished, morals no longer sharp, and nightmares that arrived with military precision every night at 2:17, the time the bomb detonated. He remembered little of the moment after the explosion, only smoke, only silence where sound should have been, only dust swallowing light. He remembered lying face down on hot sand, tasting blood and metal, thinking the world had ended. He remembered calling the horse's name, voice shredded, breath ragged, but hearing nothing in return. No hooves, no breath, no heartbeat. The battlefield swallowed the sound like a grave. They said the explosion burned everything beyond recognition. They said the unit was lost without trace. They said no animal or man could have survived that blast wave. He believed them. He carried that belief like a burden strapped to his chest. And now, this impossible call. The voice telling him a horse bearing those scars was alive. That the animal declared dead in war was standing in a rescue stall, trembling at the sound of metal gates. That fate had delivered back something he had buried with a folded flag and a broken oath. He drove faster. At dawn, the rescue barn sat quiet beneath thin fog, the kind that clung low and made everything appear half-dreamt. Birds sat silent along the fence posts, watching like sentries. Inside, the air held the soft smell of clean hay, disinfectant, and the sharp electricity of anticipation. The gelding stood motionless in the far corner of the stall, head low, ears flicked back, breath shallow. The tremor in his muscles came and went like waves, not random, but rhythmic, as though he was listening to sounds no one else could hear. His eyes no longer watched the living world. They stared somewhere far away, a place of sand and sirens and burning sky. When the distant sound of a diesel engine rolled across the gravel driveway, the horse froze, muscles locked. Breath halted. His hind leg trembled violently, threatening collapse. He pressed into the stall wall until wood groaned beneath his weight. Trauma did not fade, it waited. Boots hit gravel outside. Not hurried, but heavy, deliberate steps, the kind carried by men who have marched long distances with heavy packs. The barn door slid open, hinges squealing. The sound struck the horse like a blast. His head snapped upward, nostrils flaring, pupils dilating to stark black moons. Something deep in him recognized the rhythm of those footsteps. He backed until there was nowhere left to go. Hooves scraped concrete. Breath tore through his throat like wire. Then he saw him. A silhouette stood in the center aisle, tall, shoulders scarred, with the posture of lifelong discipline. His left leg bore the stiffness of metal pins. His hands trembled. A thin dog tag hung beneath his shirt, catching a glint of morning light. For a moment the rescue staff stopped breathing, not out of fear, but reverence. War clung to that space like smoke. The horse stared, unblinking, frozen statue stillness. The man stared back, breath suspended, eyes burning. No one moved. Then the gelding's ears twitched, not back, not flat, forward. A sound escaped his throat, not a scream. Not a panic, something closer to recognition breaking through ice. His front knees buckled, body shaking, head dropping until his muzzle touched the ground. Not collapsing in weakness, but sinking as if taking a knee in front of something sacred. The man pressed a hand over his mouth, shoulders shaking. His whole body bent forward, breath breaking loose, knees nearly giving under the weight of the moment. Not grief, not relief. Something deeper, the collision of memory and miracle. The staff stepped back without being asked. Some reunions deserve silence. The horse lifted his head a fraction, eyes locked on the man's face. A low sound vibrated through his chest, not quite a whinny, not quite a cry, a sound shaped by years of orders and praise and trust built in battlefields where words meant survival. But the past was not finished with either of them. A metal feed bucket clattered against concrete 2 stalls down. The noise cracked through the air like gunfire. The horse exploded into motion, body slamming sideways into the stall wall, breath bursting in violent panic, hooves striking steel in blind terror. Foam flew from his mouth. His injured leg buckled. His body contorted with the muscle memory of trying to shield another life with his own. The veteran flinched, hand shooting upward instinctively as though shielding his head from debris. His breath shattered into sharp gasps. His vision blurred with sand and smoke he had long tried to bury. 2 broken soldiers living the same war again, side by side. The staff moved to intervene, but the man lifted a hand, not commanding, not demanding, simply knowing. He stepped forward slowly, his own body shaking with the voltage of memories flooding through nerves scarred by injury and trauma. No armor, no uniform, no weapons, nothing between them but time. The horse stopped, just stopped. Trembling, sweating, panting, eyes wide, but still. Frozen like a battlefield statue before collapse. Silence swallowed the space. The man took another step. The gelding's breathing slowed, inches at a time, like a machine powering down from battle mode. His ears softened. His eyes changed, not clearing fully, but shifting from terror to confusion to something like fragile hope. And then, slowly, impossibly, he stepped forward. One step, dragging his injured leg, then another. He lowered his head until his forehead rested against the man's chest. Not an accident, not an instinct, a choice. The barn dissolved into tears and stunned silence. 7 years, declared dead, buried without burial. Now alive in the arms of the only person who ever understood him. News travels fast when miracles breathe. A volunteer recorded the moment on her phone, hands shaking, and posted the footage anonymously that afternoon with a caption that read simply, "A soldier just found the war horse he thought died, saving his life within 12 hours. The video spread across social media like wildfire. Within 24, national news outlets called the rescue center. Within 48, international press vans lined the gravel road outside the barn. Reporters spoke quietly through tears. Veterans arrived to stand in silence at the fence. Letters flooded in thousands from people who understood loss, duty, trauma, and devotion. The horse who had been given no name at the kill pen became a symbol of the unseen stories buried in shadows. A reminder that sacrifices made in silence are still sacrifices, that heroes do not always walk on two legs, and still, no one knew his true name. It had been buried with him. Until one day, the veteran returned carrying something wrapped in faded military canvas, gently, carefully, like handling something sacred. He unrolled the cloth. A brass tag glinted faintly in the light, worn, scarred. Bent at one corner from shrapnel, a field identification plate once clipped to a tactical vest. It read, Unit K-17, Warrior. Healing did not arrive like sunlight breaking through clouds. It came slowly, like dawn seen through smoke, dim, hesitant, fragile. At first, every sound inside the rescue barn threatened to rip the horse back into war. Every closing gate turned his muscles to stone. Every loud voice made his eyes go white with terror. He slept standing, head low, body stiff, as if collapsing would be fatal. Daniel visited daily. He drove for hours without complaint, arriving before sunrise and leaving after dark. He sat beside the stall, unmoving, breathing slowly, giving the horse something constant to anchor to. He did not try to touch him in the beginning. He simply existed near him, a presence familiar enough to soften the edges of the memories clawing inside the gelding's mind. Trauma recognized trauma, and slowly, a bridge formed between them, not built with rope or halter, but with silence lived together. When the horse trembled, the veteran trembled too. When the horse flinched, his body flinched in echo, both hearing explosions no one else could hear, both surviving moments that never ended. Bit by bit, breath returned to rhythm. Bit by bit, muscles untensed. Bit by bit, the war loosened its grip. The first small victory came when a volunteer accidentally dropped a broom. The handle cracked sharply against concrete, a sound like gunmetal. The horse jolted violently, but his eyes did not go flat with panic. He turned, searching. His gaze locked on Daniel, and something passed between them, a question and an answer. He did not bolt. He did not crash into walls. He stood breathing hard, waiting for reassurance he could trust. It was the first brick laid in freedom. Days passed, then weeks. The horse began to move with more confidence. His gait was uneven, one hind leg dragging slightly. Nerves had been damaged beyond repair. Running might never return. But he walked, and each step carried the weight of a soldier rising from the ground he thought he would die on. Mara watched them from the arena rail some mornings, hands clasped against her heart. She had seen rescues before, horses regaining weight, strength, spirit, but never had she seen two beings rebuild each other at the same pace, like shattered stone reforming along the same fracture lines. They walked the perimeter of the arena day after day, side by side. Daniel's limp matched the gelding's lame gait, step for step, like two halves of a rhythm broken in the same blast. Veterans began visiting the barn more often, some on crutches, some in wheelchairs, some hiding tremors beneath sleeves. They came to watch the horse walk. They came to stand in silence where words failed. Something about that animal, broken, scarred, unfinished, held a mirror to their own wounds. He became a witness, a reminder that survival does not always look like victory. When cameras arrived, the rescue tried to protect him from attention, but the story moved like wildfire through nations hungry for something pure. News anchors choked up on live broadcasts. Military officials released statements requesting review of policies surrounding service animals. Colleges asked to use the case in ethics curricula. Foundations offered support. A global question rose from a barn in Louisiana. Why do we honor soldiers and leave their partners to die unseen? The horse stood quietly through it all, unaware of the storm around him, caring only for the steady presence of the man who returned each day like the sun. One afternoon, while the barn lay quiet under golden late-day light, Daniel brought a small pouch of sand collected from the place where everything changed. He had kept it for years, a relic he once believed he would scatter over his own grave. His hands shook as he opened it. Something shifted in the air, heavy, electric. The horse lifted his head sharply, nostrils flaring. He stepped forward, hooves scraping dirt, eyes wide but clear. He leaned in, touching his muzzle to Daniel's chest, and suddenly the memories returned, not like ghosts tearing open wounds, but like film unspooling in soft, slow motion. Heat so intense it bent the horizon. The metallic scent of explosives buried beneath sand, the sound of breath held too long, the tension of waiting for a pressure plate to break the world open. Then, the blast, the sensation of flying through dust. The horse turned, shielding Daniel's body with his own. A shock wave slammed through muscle and bone. Darkness swallowed everything. But beneath the memories, something new appeared, something the veteran had never seen clearly before. The horse survived long enough to stand again. The horse struggled upward through smoke. The horse turned back toward him. The horse tried to return. He had not abandoned Daniel. He had not died instantly. He had fought his way back toward the man he had been trained to protect, until the world buried him in debris and soldiers separated them, believing him already lost. For the first time in 7 years, Daniel understood. The guilt he carried did not belong to him. The two of them had both survived. The blast did not take everything. Some part of the story had remained unfinished, waiting. The gelding nuzzled the canvas pouch gently, like recognizing something sacred. His breathing softened into a sound that trembled between grief and relief. And the veteran said it aloud for the first time in years, not as a command, not as an order, but as a memory resurrected. Warrior. The horse lifted his head with sudden clarity, ears forward, muscles tightening with a forgotten pride. The name moved through him like electricity, a signal returning to a wire-long cut. His posture changed, not pain, not panic, but something like standing at attention. Warrior. A name earned in sand, in fire, in sacrifice. A name returned in peace, in snow, in a second chance. For the first time since the explosion, the horse looked whole. Word spread until journalists, politicians, generals, and activists stood shoulder to shoulder outside the fence, holding signs demanding change. Legislation formed. Policies shifted. Proposals reached Washington. People who never understood military animal duty began to speak their names with reverence. Warrior became the face of a movement, a symbol of those who serve without applause. A reminder that loyalty does not end at borders or battlefields. Through it all, Warrior walked beside Daniel step for step, two survivors rebuilding the world 1 inch at a time. Spring arrived slowly that year, as if the season itself was afraid to break the fragile peace that had settled over the rescue ranch. The cold rains softened the ground, grass returned in pale green sheets, birds nested under barn eaves where once there had been silence. Warrior's coat regained its shine, muscles filled out over ribs once sharp as wire, and the hollow fear in his eyes melted little by little each time he breathed deep and let the past fall away. The world outside the ranch changed too. Legislators drafted new bills protecting military working animals from abandonment. Funds were raised to transport forgotten war horses home. Memorials were planned in cities across the country to honor partnerships forged in blood and dust. Schools requested documentary footage for classrooms. Newspapers printed Warrior's image with headlines that felt too large to comprehend. But the largest transformation happened somewhere no camera could record, inside the man who walked beside Warrior every day. Daniel had not spoken for years about the night the war took everything from him. He had carried the memories like laid, buried beneath silence and shame. He had worn a mask of survival while drowning behind it. He had stood at the edge more times than anyone knew, staring down into dark places where ending seemed easier than continuing. He had written a letter once, a goodbye letter, and sealed it in an envelope he hid beneath a loose floorboard in his house. He had planned a day, a time, a method. The weight of grief, guilt, and loneliness had pressed so long and so hard that breath had felt optional. And then a phone call arrived, and then a horse breathed against his chest, and the world shifted. Warrior had done what no doctor, therapist, or medal could do. He gave Daniel a reason to stay. He returned purpose to a man who had forgotten what it felt like to matter. He gave him back the part of himself that died on the battlefield. Warrior became his anchor. Months later, a crowd gathered at the state capitol under a sky so blue it looked painted. Flags snapped in a sharp breeze. Veterans stood in long rows, uniforms pressed, boots shining, medals catching sun. Reporters clustered near cameras. Families clutched photographs of soldiers whose stories ended differently. A military brass band waited in reverent silence. At the center of the courtyard, a ramp led up to a stage where a podium waited between two American flags. Warrior walked beside Daniel, step for step, their matching limps moving in perfect rhythm. The crowd fell silent, as if witnessing something sacred. No announcement was needed. Everyone knew why they were there. Warrior halted, standing tall, ears forward, eyes calm. The sunlight glinted across the brass plate, hanging gently against his chest. Unit K-17. Warrior. A four-star general placed a medal around the gelding's neck, hands trembling ever so slightly as they brushed coarse mane. It was the first time in U.S. history that a military horse received such recognition in person. Warrior did not bow or rear or break formation. He simply breathed, steady, grounded, unshaken by applause or cameras or ceremony. A soldier still. Daniel stepped to the podium, papers shaking in his hand, not from nerves but from emotion too large to fit inside a single body. The silence in the crowd felt vast, like a cathedral waiting for prayer. He looked down at Warrior, and his breath stilled in his chest. He did not read the speech written for him. He did not speak of policy or funding or historical significance. Instead, he spoke from a place deeper than any uniform could reach. He spoke of the night everything ended and the morning something returned. He spoke of the 7 years he spent surviving instead of living. He spoke of the letter hidden under floorboards, the one he never expected anyone to find. He spoke of the exact moment he changed his mind, the moment he looked into Warrior's eyes in that dusty barn aisle and felt his heartbeat steady for the first time in years. He spoke the truth. Warrior saved his life, not once, but twice. The crowd did not breathe. Soldiers swallowed hard. Reporters lowered cameras, unable to film through tears. Mothers clutched photographs tighter. Veterans bowed their heads. And for a long moment, the world went silent in reverence. Warrior nudged Daniel gently, forehead pressing against his chest, as though signaling the end of the speech. The crowd erupted, applause rolling like thunder, not loud but powerful, not chaotic but unified. A salute to two survivors who had found each other again. There were no fireworks, no speeches from politicians, no triumph painted in artificial colors, just love. Just two soldiers standing side by side, whole. Warrior lived the rest of his years in peace at Daniel's small ranch in Colorado, surrounded by quiet hills and wide open sky. He never learned to run again. His hind leg remained damaged beyond repair, but he walked freely, grazing under cottonwood trees, sleeping in the sun, resting in warmth instead of fear. Visitors came to meet him. School children, veterans, journalists, rescue volunteers, soldiers with missing limbs and shaking hands. They stood beside him, touched his scarred neck, and something inside them changed, sometimes small, sometimes everything. Warrior did not understand cameras or headlines or legacy. He understood presence, trust, duty, connection. When he finally passed years later, he did it quietly lying beside Daniel in the early morning. The sunrise spilled across the pasture, soft gold filling the sky, as if lighting the path ahead. Daniel sat beside him for hours, one hand resting over Warrior's shoulder, feeling warmth fade gradually like the closing notes of a song too beautiful to forget. And when the last breath came, soft, peaceful, final, he bowed his head and whispered gratitude into the space between worlds. Warrior was buried on the hill overlooking the ranch, beneath the tree where he once slept. A simple stone marked the place, carved not with rank, not with titles, not with medals, but with the only truth that ever mattered. Warrior, he saved me. Some battles are fought with weapons and armor. Some are fought in silence, alone, behind closed doors. And some are fought side by side, breath against breath, heartbeat against heartbeat, between those who refuse to let the other fall. Heroes do not always wear uniforms. Some arrive on four legs, some speak without words, some carry scars that tell the truth no history book can hold. Love is a battlefield, but it is also a bridge, one that leads us back to ourselves when we are lost. One that reminds us that survival is not always victory, but choosing to stay is. And sometimes, the greatest rescue is not when we save them, but when they save us.